Story 1. This happened in 2019. I was 24, house sitting for my professor's family while they were on vacation in Europe. I found a locked door in the basement that wasn't mentioned in any of the house instructions. On the third night, I heard someone unlocking it from the inside. Dr. Morrison was my anthropology professor at the university. She and her husband were going to Italy for 2 weeks and needed someone to watch their house, water the plants, and feed their cat. She knew I was looking for ways to make extra money and offered me the job. $500 for 2 weeks of basically just staying at their house. It seemed perfect. Their house was in a nice suburban area about 20 minutes from campus. 3 bedrooms, 2 stories, a finished basement that Dr. Morrison used as a home office. She gave me a full tour when I arrived, showed me where everything was, and gave me detailed instructions for the cat, the plants, and the thermostat. She was very thorough, very organized. The kind of person who had everything labeled and color-coded. The first 2 days were fine. I settled into a routine. I'd go to campus for my classes, come back in the afternoon, work on assignments, feed the cat, water the plants. The house was comfortable, quiet. I had the whole place to myself. It felt like a vacation. On the third night, I decided to do some laundry. Dr. Morrison had said I could use their washer and dryer in the basement. I went down around 9 p.m. with a basket of clothes. The basement was finished, carpeted, with her office on one side and a laundry area on the other. There was also a storage area with shelves full of boxes and old furniture. That's when I noticed the door. It was tucked in the corner of the storage area, behind a bookshelf. I hadn't seen it during the tour because the bookshelf partially blocked it. It was just a regular door, white, with a standard doorknob. But there was a deadbolt on it, locked from the outside. I thought it was probably just a closet or maybe access to the crawl space. But something about it bothered me. Why would you need a deadbolt on a basement closet? I tried the doorknob. Locked. I looked around for a key but didn't see one. I did my laundry and went back upstairs, but I couldn't stop thinking about that door. I texted Dr. Morrison. Hey, found a locked door in the basement storage area. Do you need me to check on anything in there? I waited for a response but didn't get one. They were 7 hours ahead in Italy, probably already asleep. Around 11 p.m., I was in the living room watching TV when I heard something. A sound from the basement, a metallic clicking sound, like a lock turning, then the creak of a door opening. I muted the TV and listened. I heard footsteps. Someone walking around in the basement, slow, shuffling footsteps on the carpet. My first thought was that someone had broken in. But all the doors and windows upstairs were locked. I'd checked them before settling in for the night. The only entrance to the basement was through the house. Unless someone had been down there the whole time. I grabbed my phone and opened the dial pad, ready to call 911. I crept toward the basement door in the kitchen. It was closed. I pressed my ear against it and listened. The footsteps had stopped. Now I heard something else. Papers rustling, like someone going through documents. I called 911, whispered to the dispatcher that someone was in the house. She asked if I could safely leave. I said yes. The front door was right there. She told me to leave immediately and wait outside for the police. I grabbed my keys and coat and went out the front door. Stood in the driveway, watching the house. The lights were on in the living room and kitchen, but I couldn't see into the basement from outside. I waited. The police arrived about 7 minutes later. 2 officers. I explained the situation, and they went inside. I watched from the driveway as they searched the house. After about 10 minutes, one of them came out and asked me to come back inside. They'd found something. In the basement, the locked door was standing open. The deadbolt had been unlocked from the inside, which shouldn't have been possible. Behind the door was a small room, maybe 8 by 10 feet. There was a cot, a small table, and a lamp. Some books are on a shelf. a mini fridge in the corner, and trash, food wrappers, empty water bottles. Someone had been living in there. The officers asked if I knew anything about this room. I said no, I'd never seen it before tonight. They asked if the homeowners had mentioned it. I said no. One officer took photos while the other called for backup. They searched the rest of the house. No one was there. Whoever had been in that room had left. But the back door to the basement, which led directly outside to the backyard, was unlocked. I hadn't even known there was a back door down there. It was behind some storage boxes. I called Dr. Morrison. It was 5 a.m. her time, but this couldn't wait. She answered, sounding groggy and confused. I explained what had happened. There was a long silence. Then she said, "What room?" "There's no room behind that door. That's just a storage closet." I told her there was definitely a room, that the police were there right now documenting it. She said that was impossible. They'd lived in that house for 8 years, and there was no room there. She put her husband on the phone. He said the same thing. Just a storage closet full of holiday decorations and old files. The police let them know they needed to come home. This was a serious situation. Someone had been living in their house without their knowledge. Dr. Morrison and her husband flew back the next day, cutting their vacation short. When they got there and saw the room, they were in shock. Dr. Morrison kept saying it wasn't possible, that the door had always been a closet. But her husband went pale when he looked inside. He recognized some of the items. The books on the shelf were from his collection. The blanket on the cot had gone missing months ago. Someone had been taking things from their house, slowly, over time. The police investigated. They found that someone had made a copy of the house key at some point, probably years ago. They'd been coming into the house when the family was out, sleeping in that room, going through their things. The room itself had been a closet originally, but someone had cleared it out and turned it into a living space. They'd even run an extension cord under the door to power the lamp and mini fridge. They dusted for fingerprints and found a match in the system. A man named Gerald Rice, who had worked for the previous owners of the house as a handyman. He'd kept a key when the house sold and had been coming back periodically. When the police located him and searched his apartment, they found photos of Dr. Morrison and her family. Photos taken inside their house, through windows, in the yard. He'd been watching them for years. Gerald Rice was arrested and charged with stalking, burglary, and trespassing. Dr. Morrison and her husband changed all their locks, installed a security system, and eventually sold the house. They couldn't live there anymore knowing someone had been hiding in their basement. I never finished the house-sitting job. I packed my things and left that same night. Dr. Morrison paid me for the full 2 weeks anyway and apologized profusely. But I couldn't stop thinking about those 3 nights I'd spent in that house. 3 nights where someone was locked in a room in the basement, just feet below where I was sleeping. And on that 3rd night, they'd unlock the door and come out while I was there. What would have happened if I hadn't heard them? What would have happened if I'd gone down to investigate instead of calling the police? I still have nightmares about it, about that locked door, about the sound of it opening, about the shuffling footsteps in the dark. Story 2. This happened in 2021. I was 26. House sitting for a wealthy couple I'd met through a house-sitting website. When I discovered their security cameras weren't just in the normal places. They had hidden cameras in every room, including the bathrooms and the bedroom where I was sleeping. I'd been doing house-sitting gigs for about a year through this website. It was a great way to travel and make money. You stay at someone's house, take care of their pets, water plants, collect mail. In exchange, you get free accommodation and usually a daily rate. I'd done houses in Seattle, Portland, San Francisco. This job was in Los Angeles, a mansion in the Hollywood Hills. The couple, the Harringtons, were wealthy. Tech money. Their house was incredible, 5 bedrooms, a pool, a home theater, views of the entire city. They were going to the Maldives for 3 weeks and needed someone to watch their 2 dogs and maintain the property. They were paying me $200 a day. For 3 weeks of living in luxury, it was a dream job. Mrs. Harrington showed me around when I arrived. The house was massive, easy to get lost in. She showed me where the dog food was, the cleaning supplies, how to work the pool system. She mentioned they had security cameras at the entrances and in the main living areas, which was normal. She gave me the Wi-Fi password and the alarm code and then left for the airport. The first week was amazing. I'd wake up, take the dogs for a walk in the hills, swim in the pool, watch movies in the theater room. I'd been working remotely at my laptop job, so I'd do my work during the day and then enjoy the house in the evening. It felt like living in a dream. One night, about 10 days in, I was taking a shower in the master bathroom. The Harringtons had said I could use their bedroom since it was the nicest, and I figured why not. I was conditioning my hair when I noticed something odd. A tiny red light, barely visible, coming from the smoke detector on the ceiling. I turned off the water and looked closer. It was definitely a light, blinking every few seconds. I dried off, got dressed, and looked up that specific smoke detector model on my phone. It wasn't a smoke detector. It was a camera. A hidden camera designed to look like a smoke detector. My stomach dropped. I looked around the bathroom. There was another smoke detector above the toilet. I checked it. Same thing. A camera. I went into the bedroom. Another smoke detector on the ceiling. Another camera. I started checking every room. The guest bedrooms, the kitchen, the living room, the theater room. Every single room had at least one hidden camera. And they were all active, all had blinking lights. I felt violated, sick. I'd been living in this house for 10 days. Showering, changing clothes, sleeping. And they'd been watching, recording. I called Mrs. Harrington. It was late in the Maldives, but I didn't care. She answered, sounding annoyed. I told her what I'd found. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Those are for security. We have valuable art and furniture. We need to monitor the house." I said I understood security cameras in common areas, but in bathrooms? In bedrooms? That was illegal. She said they weren't breaking any laws. It was their house and their property. I said I was leaving immediately. She said if I left before the 3 weeks were up, I'd be in breach of contract and wouldn't get paid. I hung up and called the police. Explained the situation. The officer I spoke to said it was a gray area. In California, you can't record someone in places where they have a reasonable expectation of privacy, like bathrooms and bedrooms, without their consent. It got tricky since it was the Harringtons' house. He said to document everything. I spent the next hour taking photos and videos of every camera. Made sure to get clear shots of the model numbers and their locations. Then I packed my things. I wasn't staying another night in that house. As I was loading my car, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was Mr. Harrington. His voice was cold, threatening. He said I was making a big mistake, that I was overreacting. He said if I pursued this legally, they had lawyers who would destroy me. He said I'd signed an NDA as part of the house-sitting agreement, and I was violating it by talking about their security system. I told him I'd already talked to police and I was contacting a lawyer. He hung up on me. I left the property and drove to a hotel. Over the next few days, I consulted with an employment lawyer who specialized in privacy cases. She said I had a strong case. Recording someone in a bathroom or bedroom without their consent was illegal in California, regardless of who owned the property. The NDA wouldn't protect them from criminal activity. I reported it to the police, and they started an investigation. I also shared my story on the house-sitting site to warn others about the Harringtons. The website removed my post, saying it violated their terms of service about defaming clients. But other house-sitters reached out to me privately. Turned out I wasn't the first. 3 other people had house sat for the Harringtons in the past 2 years. All of them had discovered the cameras. All of them had been threatened into staying quiet. The Harringtons had used the NDA and their lawyers to intimidate people into not reporting them. With multiple victims willing to testify, the police moved forward. They got a warrant and searched the Harringtons' house. They found hard drives with hundreds of hours of recordings, not just of house sitters, but of guests, cleaning staff, contractors, anyone who'd been in their house. The Harringtons were charged with illegal surveillance. The case got media attention because of their wealth and the tech industry connection. They ended up pleading guilty to reduced charges and paid fines. They didn't serve any jail time, which was frustrating. But they were required to remove all hidden cameras and were banned from using house-sitting services. I settled with them in civil court. Got paid for my time plus damages for the invasion of privacy. The NDA was voided as part of the settlement. I never did house sitting again after that. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even now in my own apartment, I check for hidden cameras. I cover the smoke detectors with tape. I don't trust anything. The worst part was going back through those 10 days in my memory, realizing all the private moments that were recorded. Showering, changing, sleeping, moments I thought I was alone. And somewhere the Harringtons had been watching. Maybe they still have those recordings. Maybe they deleted them. I'll never know. But I'll never feel truly alone again. Story 3. This happened in 2020. I was 23. House sitting for a family friend in a rural area 2 hours from the city when I realized the previous house sitter had never left. I found her living in the attic, and she thought she still lived there. My mom's friend Carol owned a farmhouse on 20 acres outside Eugene, Oregon. She'd inherited it from her parents and used it as a weekend getaway. She asked if I'd house sit for the month of October while she was traveling through Europe. She said the previous house sitter had been unreliable and left early, and she needed someone responsible. I was between jobs and looking for a quiet place to work on my novel, so it seemed perfect. The farmhouse was old, built in the 1920s, but it had been updated over the years. 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, surrounded by fields and woods. The nearest neighbor was a mile away. Carol gave me a key and detailed instructions, said to make myself at home, and left for her trip. The first few days were exactly what I needed. Quiet, peaceful, inspiring. I'd write during the day, take walks in the evening, cook simple meals. There was no TV, but there was Wi-Fi and lots of books. It felt like I'd stepped back in time. On the 4th night, I heard footsteps above me. I was in the living room, working on my laptop, when I heard someone walking around on the 2nd floor. Slow, careful footsteps. My first thought was an animal had gotten into the attic. The house was old, could have gaps in the roof. I went upstairs to investigate. All 3 bedroom doors were closed, just as I'd left them. I was sleeping in the master bedroom, but I checked out the other 2 rooms when I first arrived. Both were guest rooms, nicely furnished, everything tidy. I opened the doors and looked inside. Everything looked the same. No signs of animals. The footsteps had stopped. I stood in the hallway listening. Then I heard it again, directly above me. Someone was in the attic. I'd noticed the attic access in the hallway ceiling, a pull-down ladder. I'd assumed it was just storage. I pulled the cord and the ladder unfolded. I climbed up carefully, using my phone flashlight to see. The attic was unfinished, just exposed beams and insulation. But someone had set up a living space in one corner. There was a sleeping bag, a pillow, a camping lantern, snacks and water bottles, books and magazines, and clothes. Women's clothes, draped over a beam. I backed down the ladder quickly. My heart was pounding. Someone was living up there, right above where I'd been sleeping for 4 nights. I called Carol. It went to voicemail. She was probably on a plane or somewhere without service. I called the police. Explained I was house sitting and found evidence someone was living in the attic. They said they'd send someone, but it would be at least 40 minutes. The farmhouse was outside their usual patrol area. I went outside to wait. Stood by my car, keys in hand, ready to leave if I needed to. About 20 minutes later, I saw movement in an upstairs window. Someone was looking out. A woman, pale, with dark hair. We made eye contact. She didn't move, just stared at me. Then she disappeared from the window. A minute later, the front door opened. She stepped out onto the porch. She was probably in her early 20s, thin, wearing a stained t-shirt and sweatpants. She looked confused. "Can I help you?" she said, like I was the intruder. I said I was house sitting. Carol had asked me to stay here for the month. The woman shook her head. "No, I'm house sitting. I've been here since September." I said Carol had told me the previous house sitter left early. The woman got agitated. "I didn't leave. I live here." "Carol knows I'm here." I asked her name. She said Emily. She said Carol had hired her in late August to house sit while Carol was traveling. She'd been here over a month. She seemed genuinely confused about why I was there. I showed her the text from Carol, the instructions she'd given me, the key she'd provided. Emily looked at them but didn't seem to process the information. She kept saying she lived here, that this was her job. The police arrived, 2 deputies. I explained the situation to them. Emily told them she was the house sitter, that I was the trespasser. The deputies asked her for identification. She didn't have any. Said it was inside. One deputy went inside with her to get her ID. The other stayed with me. After about 10 minutes, the first deputy came back out with Emily. He had a driver's license in his hand. He ran it through his system, and his expression changed. Emily wasn't just a house sitter. She was Carol's niece. She'd been living with Carol on and off for years, had mental health issues, had been in and out of treatment facilities. Carol had asked her to leave in early September, saying she couldn't live there anymore. Emily had refused. Carol had thought Emily had left when she saw her car was gone. But Emily had just parked it down the road and had been living in the attic. The deputies asked Emily to come with them. She started crying, saying she had nowhere else to go. They were patient with her, explained that she couldn't stay in someone else's house without permission. They took her to a mental health crisis center for evaluation. I called Carol again, left a detailed voicemail about what had happened. She called me back 2 hours later, devastated. She'd had no idea Emily was still there. She felt terrible for putting me in that situation. She said she'd help Emily get the right support and cover my hotel stay for the rest of the month if I wasn't comfy at the farmhouse. I stayed one more night, but I couldn't relax. Every sound made me jump. I kept thinking about Emily living in the attic right above me for 4 nights, listening to me move around, watching me through the attic access maybe, coming down when I was asleep or out for a walk. I moved to a hotel the next day. Carol understood and paid for it as she'd promised. Emily was placed in a long-term treatment facility. Carol sold the farmhouse a few months later. Said she couldn't deal with the property anymore. It held too many difficult memories. I think about Emily sometimes. I don't think she meant any harm. She was just sick and confused and desperately trying to hold on to a place she thought was home. But the experience changed how I think about house sitting, about staying in someone else's space. You never really know what happened there before you arrived. You never really know if you're alone. Subscribe to Spookfeed and support us. We'll bring you more good stories.